All right, welcome to this budget special in the countdown to the Union Budget 2025. This is a special segment where we would analyze, debate and perhaps dissect some of the nuances of the budget. Yesterday we spoke about the budget setup in terms of the macro, oil, crude, interest rates. Today we would be talking about perhaps one of the biggest success stories of government, which is that how exactly we have seen the government expenditure engine in a sense doing all the heavy lifting for the economy, and how that in a sense has been responsible for bringing India back at least on the strong growth post-COVID. So let's first look at the Capex trend, because Capex is a very unique success story which in a sense has been instrumental in kickstarting this entire broken down Capex cycle. The budget outlay in rupees crore for FY22 was 6 lakh crore, 7.5 lakh crore, and FY24 it stood at 9.48 lakh crore. But the number just does not stop there. If estimates are anything to go by, last year's number of 10.2 lakh crore could see another bump up of 10%, and that really could stand tall at 11.6 lakh crore. So the idea here is that government has been doing a lot of heavy lifting of budget of government for the economy, whether it is in form of road, railways or even shipping. Now, one of the numbers which we always look at is that how much is the capital expenditure growing, and how much is the capital expenditure growing as percentage of GDP. Because if you keep the capital expenditure number same, it may look fat in isolation, but are you keeping it at a reasonable number as percentage of the GDP? And this is where the incremental jump has been very impressive. 2% has now become almost 3.5%. That's the FY25 estimates, where the budget as percentage, expenditure as the percentage of the GDP will stand. The other resounding success story, or the standout success story, has been the Capex in terms of, we'll talk about it, in terms of the target which has been achieved. But here I just want to emphasize on the sectors where the Capex spend has been the highest. Started with defense, which was at 1.4 lakh crore. Now that stands at 1.7. But for highways and roads, the number has gone from 2.2 to 2.7. For railways, the number is impressive, almost 50% higher. 1.6 has become nearly 2.5, and it is projected to be in that same range. So what is the government likely to do in terms of the Capex target? And if estimates are anything to go by, and if his sources are to be believed, which you must always believe, he's got very accurate and good sources, the Capex target for FY25 could be increased in double digit on a base of 10 lakh crore. So Prakash has got all the details.
The next Union budget could see a modest increase in the capital expenditure target. We are learning from our sources that the government may take a rational approach before deciding Capex numbers for the financial year 2026. In fact, various factors are being taken into consideration, and of course that include slower spending during current financial year. But the sources are indicating that the capital expenditure target is likely to be hiked by 10 to 12% for the financial year 2026. A very significant development coming in. However, a discussion is underway within the government, and any final call will be taken closer to the budget. As you are aware that the 2024 being an election year, capital expenditure target is little slower than the last year, but the government is hopeful to achieve 90% against the total target of 11.11 lakh crore, which is earmarked for the financial year 2025 on back of higher spending by various ministries in next 3 months. Along with that, key infrastructure sectors like railways, road transport and highways, housing may get 10 to 15% higher allocation. We also given to understand that the government is mindful about the fact that gross market borrowing through dated securities may rise in financial year 2026 in order to meet repayment obligation. Therefore, all these factors will be taken into consideration. And the government will try to make better balance between fiscal prudence and capital expenditure target.
Let's take that conversation forward with Anurag Gupta. Anurag, while the Capex binge by the government has been a success story, we cannot deny that. But this year the Capex number may just not be that impressive. What is your understanding on this year's Capex target, and how much of this year's Capex budgeted target may not be achieved?
So thank you, Nikunj. Happy to be here. So I think if we look at the trends over last 2 years, this government has sent out a very resolute message that Capex capital will not be a limitation. And I think that momentum to continue, in fact, scale up. Uh, Road, rail, these are not only constructions, these form the backbone of any developed and vibrant economy. And I think the vision of Viksit Bharat will firmly stand on creating modern infrastructure, both hard and soft digital infrastructure. And in that context, I agree with you. I think once the capex and the capital constraint is off, the focus does come on uh, the execution capacity of the government. I think if we look at railways and road, both sectors have seen promising capacity creation, and I think over last 2 years, and the pace has actually quadrupled in last 3-4 years, and I expect that momentum to continue at least for this year and definitely for next few years as well.
So I go back to that question again. In terms of your numbers at Deloitte, how much of the Capex target this year will be achieved as percentage? I mean, out of the 10.5 lakh crore, how much do you think this year would actually be achieved?
I think we definitely should be able to reach definitely between 95% to 98%. Of course, there will be some uh, legacy issues will remain, but we definitely expect the capex allocations to be exhausted this year.
The Capex target next year could go by another 10%. So 10.5 could become 11.4 or it could become 11.5, but it's headed higher. Can the economy absorb that much?
So if you look at the economy, the requirement is there. Definitely. In fact, if you talk about the vision of becoming Viksit Bharat by 2047, we have to create this infrastructure ahead of demand. And our estimates range between that this infrastructure capacity has to be created in next 10 years to realize this vision. So one, definitely the demand is there. If we look at the railway networks, if we look at road networks, the critical element will be the execution capability of the government public sector agencies itself. And I believe I would definitely expect greater focus there to improve this capex absorption and bringing in greater execution certainty in infrastructure creation. The demand is definitely yes. The limitation will be definitely government's own limitation to absorb that and commission projects on time.
Defense, roads and highways, which to your mind has been the biggest success story so far?
So if we look at railway, definitely has turned around. The year-on-year capacity creation, new network created. I think over the last 3 to 4 years, we have created capacity, new track infrastructure, which is greater than the entire track of countries like Switzerland. Similarly, highways, definitely a success story. World has stopped and taken a look and taken references, even learned a few lessons on that. And I expect these two sectors to continue, I think, the success story in the infrastructure domain.
Do you think the government needs to add one more sector? Right now it is defense, railways, roads and infra. But do you think something like ports and aviation need to be included? Because if the economy has to grow and if the Capex is growing in double digit, it can easily A, create a new sector, B, the current sectors in a sense soon will run out of capacity or inefficiency would essentially, would fade away.
I would expect definitely aviation to be one of the front runners in that aspect. But my personal choice would be to increase spending in social infrastructure, improving infrastructure like water, infrastructure like developing larger smart cities. These are the ones which impact directly the quality of life of common man. And I would definitely expect them to be, I think, among the front runners to stand along railways in future.
The multiplier effect with which the infrastructure sector creates, the delta, I mean, last year was as high as 3, which is that if you're spending 100, you are getting impact on the economy which was equivalent to 300.
Yeah.
Do you think this delta now will get compromised as the size increases, as efficiency kicks in? When there is a lot of efficiency, then inefficiency cannot be corrected.
So Nikunj, that's the law of economics. As we grow, the elasticities do come down, and I think the multiplier effect in a vibrant economy like India will come down. But I think the net infrastructure will definitely be a catalyst for this for the GDP for sure. Whether right now it's three, my estimates say that 1 rupee you spend in three in infrastructure, the GDP has a multiplier effect of around 3.5. Uh, that 3.5 will come down to 3 probably or 2.5, but the net multiplier effect will definitely be there. It's also important to note that infrastructure is actually the enabler for GDP. Infrastructure, railways do not move people from A to B. These infrastructure, they move people out of poverty. Efficient ports, efficient highways move industry from being an average to meet their economic aspirations and towards greater competitiveness. So I think the net requirement for infrastructure as well as the multiplier effect, even if as it goes and the law of economics kick in, but the greater multiplier effect will definitely be there, and the benefits will definitely be infinite.
Where do you think the low-hanging fruits have been plucked, and where do you think the low-hanging fruits are still left? And I'll elaborate this question just for the benefit of our viewers. For example, we've seen huge efficiency which has kicked in because of the digital economy. Now that cannot be multiplied beyond a point, because India already has seen huge penetration in terms of mobile phones, bank account, Jan Dhan accounts. So where do you think low-hanging fruits have been plucked, and where do you think they still need to be plucked?
So if we look at, I think e-commerce, our penetration is in double digits and probably only half of what we have. And as I think this is expected to grow, I definitely see greater requirement and greater focus on coming on logistics and improving the first and last mile delivery. I think there are building blocks which are in place, and that is definitely one of the low hanging fruits government should focus on.
Okay. Uh, I'll just change the gears and talk about the whole state versus center, center versus city, city versus state. Uh, if we aspire to grow at 8%, and if we want to be a $10 trillion economy in next couple of years or before the turn of the next decade, you need smart cities, and that is a lacking factor. You and me live in Mumbai. Your office is behind my office. It's 5 kilometers. No, it's 4 kilometers, but it'll take half an hour for me to reach your office, or it'll take half an hour for you to reach my office if we invite you. That is not the kind of India which will grow if we aspire to be a $10 trillion economy soon. What can be done in this budget for smart cities, for cities?
So I think apart from greater allocation, it is also important that we plan these cities smartly. If you look at the way we do our planning today, rail and road do plan in isolation. I would expect a governmental push or a reformative push for greater integrated planning. So I think it is important to recognize that capital is not the only critical success factor. And this government has actually shown its resolute commitment that it will not be a constraint. And in that, once that actually eliminates, the major focus comes on planning it right, planning it smartly. And I think greater integrated planning, uh, ensuring that rather than a geographical planning, moving to a corridors-based planning, wherein both the modes, rail, road, or whether it is the urban infrastructure, all of them complement each other, increase transit-oriented developments. I think these are the solutions, and this is where the answers lie. It may not be the road ahead. I think that it requires change from the way we plan our infrastructure, the way to reform the legacy systems. But I think government has already made the right moves in this direction. If you look at the latest Leeds report, the 2024 edition, government has placed a significant focus on integrated planning. Efforts like Gati Shakti, PM Gati Shakti national master plans are all moves in the right direction, and I expect them to be scaled up to solve the problem of congestion definitely in urban cities.
All right. Anurag, appreciate your time and thank you for joining us. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some specific infrastructure stocks, which historically are called as budget picks, how they've moved.